All right, remember when Donald Trump received the endorsement of former Klan leader David Duke and then lied about not knowing who he was?
I don't know anything about David Duke, okay? I don't know anything about what you're even talking about with white supremacy or white supremacists.
Remember when Donald Trump retweeted a far-right anti-Islamic group and then said this?
You're telling me about these people because I know nothing about these people.
Well, you'll never know what he's saying now about the Proud Boys, a white supremacist group who he told in front of a national audience to stand back and stand by.
I don't know who the Proud Boys are. I mean, you'll have to give me a definition because I really don't know who they are.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe. It is Thursday, October 1st. Along with Joe, Willie, and me, we have professor at Princeton University, Eddie Glaude Jr., and U.S. national editor at the Financial Times, Ed Luce. Good to have you all on board.
You know, Mika and Willie, it's so interesting, isn't it, that he's saying the same thing now
There it goes again.
he said, as we've been talking about for 4 years, as he said before Super Tuesday in 2016, where he denied knowing who David Duke was. I don't even know who David Duke is.
Right.
And, of course, back in 2000, there are quotes of him attacking David Duke and saying he wouldn't be a Reform Party candidate because David Duke was a racist and he didn't want to be in that party. And then he was even sort of slippery about the Klan. I can't really attack this group because I don't know what they're doing. And Mika, here he goes doing the same thing again.
Listen, he gave them a very clear message to stand back and stand by. And you could see him thinking, Willie, in that debate, how do I do this? How do I do this? Because both Chris Wallace and Joe Biden were like, OK, go ahead, denounce, say it, do it, do it. And he thought, how am I going to do this? And he didn't do it.
He didn't do it. And the semantic game some people are playing, well, he meant to say stand down and he used the wrong word.
Sure.
Or what the president is saying now, I don't even know who the Proud Boys are, lets him off the hook. Because the question was, will you condemn white supremacists? And rather than saying, of course I will, he said, well, which ones? He wanted to get specific about which ones. And here he was yesterday, the president, when asked about Proud Boys. You will hear echoes of the sound bites Mika just played for you.
Mr. President, President
What you meant last night when you said that the Proud Boys should stand back and stand by?
I don't know who the Proud Boys are. I mean, you'll have to give me a definition because I really don't know who they are.
So, Mr. President, did you misspeak when you said stand by? That's my first question.
Just stand by. Look, law enforcement will do their work. They're going to stand down. They have to stand down.
White supremacists, they clearly love you and support you. Do you welcome that?
I want law and order to be a very important part. It's a very important part of my campaign. And when I say that, what I'm talking about is law enforcement the police have to take care. And they should stop defunding the police like they've done in New York. Like they've done in New York. I just told you.
But do you denounce them? Do you denounce
I've always denounced any form of any of that you have to denounce. But I also, and Joe Biden has to say something about Antifa.
So he cannot, Joe, just bring himself to say, when he's first asked about white supremacists, will you denounce them? He gets to it eventually, but first he has to give his speech about law and order and about where Joe Biden has fallen down. Again and again and again over his entire life, frankly, but in his political life for the last 4 years, this has been his answer. Either I don't really know those people who I just gave a tacit endorsement to, or I'm going to change the subject because I know they support me and I can't risk losing them.
But, you know, what he didn't even do in that clip, and what he can't do, is say, when asked, do you condemn white supremacy? He will never say yes.
Right.
Oh, I'm against all of the violence on all sides. Do you, you know, and as far as the white boys go, the Proud Boys go, he knows who they are. I mean, the FBI is out once again saying that right-wing extremism, white supremacy is one of the greatest dangers in America right now as far as domestic terrorism goes. But this happens, Eddie, time and time again. Will you condemn white supremacy? He will never say, yes, I condemn white supremacy. And by the way, this is not a semantics game. This has been going on for 4 years. And whether it's refusing to condemn David Duke at first, refusing to condemn the Klan, then coming back saying something was wrong with my earpiece, yesterday trying to clarify things, but would not clarify it. He was asked several times, do you condemn white supremacy? I condemn all of it. It's always generalized. He always tries to change the subject. He always goes to Antifa or some left-wing groups that he wants to condemn. Yesterday, he talked about law enforcement, but will not come out and condemn white supremacist groups.
Yes, Joe, and it seems to me that there's a reason why he won't condemn them, and it's something that we just need to say out loud. Donald Trump will not condemn white supremacists because he is one. And we can make that judgment, not to rush to it. We can look at his policies. We can look at his behavior. It's not just simply David Duke, Joe. It's QAnon. It's the Klan. I mean, every single time he has an opportunity to declare that these people are outside of the democratic process, that they should be condemned in an unqualified way, he dances, he skirts, and it has everything to do with, I believe, right, his alignment with these folks. The Proud Boys are proudly call themselves Western chauvinist. They are pro-white. They don't want to feel guilty about being white. It aligns with Richard Spencer. When you think about what Donald Trump says about anti-racial bias training, when you think about how he deploys ICE in particular sorts of ways, to my mind, Joe, there's an alignment. There's a consistency here. So at the end of the day, Donald Trump will not condemn white supremacists because, in my mind, to me, he is one.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.